Hey everyone. So my name is Jessie Brockway. I'm a third-year law student at Lewis & Clark, and it is my pleasure to introduce our two speakers today. We have Izzy Youre and Chris Green. Izzy is the founder and CEO of the Dodo. She received her PhD in philosophy from Columbia University, where her research focused on animal ethics and human-animal relationships. She was named one of Fast Company's most creative people in 2014 and was included on Forbes' 30 Under 30 list for media in 2015. Chris Green is the executive director of Harvard Law School's Animal Law and Policy program.
I got promoted over.
I didn't realize what I did.
You're fired.
He's a graduate of Harvard Law School, and he also went to the University of Illinois, where he created the college's first environmental science degree. He previously was the director of legislative affairs for the Animal Legal Defense Fund, and he's been published in Animal Law Review, won first prize in the inaugural animal law competitions, and regularly testifies at legislative hearings. Please join me in welcoming our two speakers.
I'm going to sit so I can watch.
I'm a little worried about the volume because I'm showing a few videos. Okay. I don't want anyone to go deaf when they come on. Okay, let's see what happens. So first, I just want to thank the Animal Law Conference for inviting me to speak today. I'm really excited and honored to be here. And when I was asked to speak, I actually thought there had been like some kind of mistake because I'm probably the only person in the entire building who hasn't studied law. So I was assured, though, that I would be presenting on the topic of alternative advocacy beyond litigation, and that I wouldn't be judged for my lack of legal expertise, so bear with me. So the Dodo, the digital media startup I founded 2 years ago, is sort of in itself an alternative approach to advocacy. For those of you who might not be familiar with it, here's our concept. The Dodo aims to be the definitive digital media brand for people who love animals. We deliver the most shareable, most emotionally and visually compelling animal-related content to the widest audience possible to really help make caring about animals a viral cause. Our content can be described as part news, part entertainment, part advocacy, and we create both written as well as video content now. So our mission with the Dodo is really to seize and combine what we see as two big and related opportunities. First, animal content is already among the most widely shared content on the internet, second only to pornography. It's extremely viral by nature. This is evidenced by the success of sites like BuzzFeed Animals, Cute Emergency, Cute Overload, and lots of other ones that are cropping up all the time. So, not to mention the fact that animal-related stories are always among the top performers for publications generally. So when the New York Times runs an animal story, which they're doing more and more, they almost always land on their most shared list. So the first opportunity we saw here is really to own the digital animal content space. And the second opportunity is kind of to do that in a responsible way. So what that means is that this opportunity relates to the fact that really there's a profound shift occurring regarding the way people think about animals. And we're witnessing this shift that's marked by increased interest in animals and increased concern for animals. So, we can see evidence of this, first of all, in academia, pretty obviously. Within the field of philosophy, which is what my background's in, a fast-growing literature on animal rights has encouraged us to consider the moral status of animals. At the same time, scientific research is really confirming the fact that animals of many, many species have complex cognitive, emotional, and social capacities that really strongly mirror our own. Other species, I'm sure everyone in this room knows this, but have been found to have aspects of language. Many species engage in tool use. Sometimes some scientists believe that there are species that possess a sense of morality. Elephants exhibit self-awareness and empathy. Cetaceans mourn their dead. Brain scans of dogs suggest that canine brains look and function similarly to our brains. So science is really continuing to show us, and in no uncertain terms, that many of the traits once thought belong exclusively to humans actually cross species boundaries. So this shift in thinking really encourages us to take animals more seriously than we have in the past, their capabilities, their suffering, and their individualized experience. And this shift is what's obviously responsible for the emergent and booming scholarly field of animal studies and, of course, animal law. And outside of academics, popular culture is increasingly rife with material on the subject of animals. New books related to our relationships to animals, from the meat we eat, to our pets at home, to exotic species in captivity or in the wild, are being published really constantly and are gaining enormous popularity. There's increased television programming related to animal protection, animal rescue, and improving our relationships to animals. And then there are, of course, the critically acclaimed award-winning documentaries like The Cove, Blackfish, and the soon-to-be-released Racing Extinction that are wildly popular and have really inspired their own activist movements. So the way we see it is that animal welfare as a cause is really moving mainstream, but no one has created a publication or brand that really reflects this. Times are changing, and caring about animals isn't just for activists anymore. It's for everyone. So being connected to and caring about animals is something more and more people are aligning themselves with every day. It's really an understatement to say that animals have, entered the mainstream consciousness. People care about animals more than ever. They're acting on it. It's affecting the way they're living and spending their money. The top 3 Change.org petitions are for animal causes. I know Chris is going to speak a little about this. And 2 of the top 3 petitions on whitehouse.gov were for animal causes. In 2014, $10.5 billion were given to animal and environmental causes. And 75% of Americans believe animals should be given legal protection, according to a recent Gallup poll. SeaWorld stock price has declined 50% since the release of Blackfish. And Ringling Brothers announced that they'll phase out their elephants by 2018, and they cited a mood shift among their audience, which is really a big deal. So a concern for animals is driving people to behave differently online, in terms of what companies they support, and like I said, in terms of how they choose to spend their money. So the animal welfare movement, once thought to be sort of a niche or fringe cause, often accused of being of secondary importance, of being for the overly sentimental, of being radical or extremist, is really arguably well on its way to being the next big progressive movement. The issue of animal welfare is increasingly front and center, and it's only going to become more mainstream in the future. And I'm used to talking to people who aren't necessarily in agreement with this, so it's nice to be in a room where I don't have to convince people. So this fact, combined with the fact that animals already own the internet from the standpoint of virality, they're really kind of the darlings of the internet, explain why we think this is the perfect time for the Dodo. We aim to tap into the viral nature of animal content to raise awareness about animal welfare. And our goal is to leverage the viral potential for animal content to make caring about animals a viral cause. Our goal is to really build the Dodo into a household name that's synonymous with treating animals well. Ideally, it should be a halo brand for anyone who loves animals, from people who self-identify as advocates all the way to people who just love their cat or dog. And we think the digital explosion, specifically the explosion of social media, presents a really unprecedented opportunity for any social movement. It presents the opportunity to create content related to a cause that people relate to enough to align themselves with. That is to share, to post on their social accounts, etc. Topics and particularly movements can really catch fire because of the prevalence of social media, and we want to tap into this opportunity specifically on behalf of animals. So our approach to making animal protection a mainstream political issue really starts with social media. Social is the new front page. That's how people are getting their news. That's how people are ingesting content. Social platforms are now the most important distribution vehicles, and content has to be created to be consumed socially. Because of this, at the Dodo, we're operating using what's called a distributed content model. So we convert and optimize our content for each social platform. What works on Facebook, for example, is going to be different from what works on Snapchat. And we aim to appeal to as broad and varied an audience as possible across these disparate social platforms. So we're really sort of cross-platform content creators. And our story angles and form often changes. So we sometimes think of it as sort of one story, 6 angles. So for example, we optimized our treatment of Cecil the Lion's story for each platform to ensure maximum reach and therefore maximum impact. For example, beautiful, colorful visuals really do well on Instagram. We often incorporate animation in Snapchat because it's a really creative platform with a younger audience. And Pinterest does really well with kind of pinnable, shareable infographics. So the social first age we're in is really a perfect fit for the animal movement because particularly on social, pets lead the pack for sharing behavior. When people share content related to pets, a staggering 91% of the time they do so publicly. And user-generated content, a result of the social age, is very, very often animal-centric. 45% of original video creators post animal content. Animal content powers a large and robust ecosystem of professional and amateur content creators who simultaneously create and consume. And the stories, photos, and videos that are widely shared have common traits. They're inspiring, they're entertaining, and they speak to companionship. In short, they're emotional. What this means is that getting people to connect to digital animal content means leading with emotion. So because of this, we're building our stories and videos to be emotional, as well as accessible, digestible, and of course really highly visual. We want them to be as shareable as possible in order to maximize our reach and impact. Because this shareability is really what drives virality and raises visibility. So our editorial approach is therefore to create content that inspires readers to connect to animals through carefully chosen news stories that have an emotional component, fun or heartwarming entertainment stories that offer readers a chance to kind of delight in and celebrate animals, and advocacy opportunities, of course. We really aim for a 50-50 mix of welfare stories and lighter stories, and we think either half alone doesn't really tell the whole story. We want to provide opportunities to readers to connect to animals through digital content, but also opportunities to learn how to get involved in serious issues that animals face. We think there's really kind of a straight line between liking animals and wanting to help animals in need, and that no one's really kind of drawing that line. People are doing either we like animals, this is a cute site, or this is super serious content, let's help. So you kind of want to streamline that. And the idea with this is that you might come to the Dodo to watch a cute cat video and end up being inspired to help protect endangered big cats. Regardless of topic, we really aim that our stories are infused with a sense of doing right by animals, but that most crucially, they all make the reader really feel something and connect emotionally. So to give you an idea of our content and our reach to date, here are some of our high-performing stories across our content categories. Our working verticals right now are inspiring, pets, SeaWorld, animals in need, rare footage, and cute. We are constantly, though, tinkering with these and testing them to see what's resonating with the broadest digital audience. Some high performer highlights include everything from the disturbing truth behind your swim with the dolphins, which over 1.2 million people read, to perfectly timed photos that make dogs look like giants, which nearly 2 million people read. To our story on how the sighting of a 103-year-old orca named Granny is bad news for SeaWorld, since their captive orcas have much shorter lifespans, which has now been seen by almost 10 million people. So by interspersing fun content that reminds people why they love animals with meaningful welfare content and committing to keeping the voice inclusive as opposed to insidery, hopeful as opposed to hopeless, and meaningful but not sanctimonious or shrill, we've been able to make pieces go viral on topics that are related to serious welfare issues. The keys we've found so far are not assuming too much knowledge or vocabulary on the part of the reader, avoiding insider jargon, and keeping the tone emotional as opposed to academic, while being careful to avoid a shrillness that makes the reader feel assaulted or guilty, because this means that they won't be more energized to get involved. Similarly, our video strategy is to use dynamic animal images and narrative storytelling to connect a broad audience to animals visually and emotionally, and often to seek to highlight cognitive and social capacities of animals. 3 highlights of what we think of as sort of all-purpose animal welfare videos, pieces that try to present caring deeply about animals as an attractive, welcoming, hopeful cause to align oneself with, are Rescued and Returned, which had 20.5 million views and 410,000 shares. First Taste of Freedom, about the release of lab animals, which had 58.3 million views and 695,000 shares. And Animals Rescuing Other Animals, which was shared by 1.2 million people and watched by 91.8 million people. As we do on the written content side, we also intersperse these videos with fun, light videos. An important reminder of what people love about animals in the first place. Cats versus bananas was seen by 21 million people. And Cats being Bros, which is my personal favorite, was seen by 48 million people. So the content mix here is crucial too. The lightness softens the blow for some of the more serious emotional pieces. I'm going to show a few of these videos over the course of the rest of my talk, and I'm going to start with animals rescuing other animals, but I'm really nervous about the volume. So let's see how this goes. Oh, it's okay.
Perfect.
So I'd like to share some key metrics with you guys to give you a better idea of what our reach is like. As I mentioned, for us, reach really amounts to impact. So we think we can only help make caring about animals viral if we really appeal to a broad mainstream audience. Our audience is growing every month, and it's highly engaged. We have 14.8 million unique visitors a month on our written content, upwards of 1.2 million Facebook fans, 81 million monthly video views, an average of 3.9 million views per video, and 24,000 shares per video. 140 million people interact with our content across all social platforms each month. Simply put, our alternative approach to advocacy is to create a brand that's synonymous with treating animals well, to have a mainstream megaphone to use to get people excited about animal issues, not just to appeal to people who are already committed. I thought I would run through what I see as 5 law-related topics that we cover on a regular basis to give an idea of what's resonating with our audience. And these are not the only topics. Obviously, a lot of what we do kind of touches legislation, but I thought I'd focus on these 5. So first, we're obsessed with dispelling myths about stereotyped breeds. We're looking to paint breeds with bad reputations in the flattering light they deserve, with pieces like pit bulls who've just been adopted and service pit bull wins right to attend school with this very special human. We found that creating content that helps people connect to a breed that might be misunderstood resonates more than pieces that might shame people for being scared of pit bulls, for example. So we see comments all the time from people saying, now I want to adopt a pit bull, they're so sweet. And we think this approach helps people feel good and active as opposed to guilty or stupid or bad, and that this is ultimately more effective. So one video we did, 5 things you know if you have a pit bull, got 14.2 million views and 343,000 shares. Like I said, shareability is key. People like sharing things that are positive, fun, and hopeful while still feeling important and meaningful. So I'm going to show this video next. so like everyone here at the Dodo, we're wanting to inspire people to advocate for stronger animal protection laws and stiffer penalties for abusers. And our approach to this is to cover stories about cases of animal abuse that focus on the stories of individual animals who were affected, to connect readers with a particular story as opposed to sort of the problem of animal abuse generally, which is amorphous and can be overwhelming, I think. So we make a point of covering stories where people set good examples by reporting animal abuse, and we're figuring out a model for stories where abusers kind of get away with murder, so to speak, to outrage readers enough to get them involved. So one issue in particular that I'm totally obsessed with is elephants in captivity, specifically in circuses. We really think it's the next SeaWorld. A familiar practice that's falling and will start to really plummet out of favor. So we cover circus elephants in every way possible, from bullhook legislation to the emotional capacities of elephants. One headline up here reads, "Circus Elephants Rush to Help Friend Who Fell During Cruel Stunt." And we celebrated Ringling Brothers' commitment to phase out their elephants. While it's not right away, and there are some questions about where the elephants are being retired to, and it's not perfect, it is a really important precedent, and we think it should feel that way to a mainstream audience. We found that it's key, this is sort of an example where we found it's key to avoid insidery language. So a headline like "The One Simple Reason Why Performing Elephants Are Never Happy Elephants" will have immense reach, whereas words like bullhooks, that the majority of people really don't know, are going to fall flat. And elephants in circuses is one issue where we're committed to raising awareness about an issue that matters and staying on top of the beat, even when other outlets aren't covering it. We often talk in the office about identifying tipping points and helping to move the conversation forward. So a recent example is the issue of trophy and relatedly canned hunting, topics that got a massive amount of attention with Cecil the Lion. So probably not surprisingly, we've been covering this beat for a long time, but this was really a tipping point. And the world was suddenly ready to talk about trophy hunting and canned hunting in a substantive way. So now we make a point of being even more all over this topic than before. And our writers kind of want to kill me. So even as other publications kind of dropped it after Cecil, there was sort of Cecil fatigue, we've been staying on it. And we feel that there's really an opening here now that this issue has reached a tipping point to keep up the momentum. Recently, we actually partnered with MSNBC a few weeks ago on their documentary Blood Lions about the canned hunting industry in South Africa, and created supporting content, articles and videos related to the film, which we then distributed across our social platforms. And partnering on projects with like-minded people and socially optimizing the message they're trying to get across is really where we see ourselves being able to be sort of most useful and offer something new to this movement. I would say that the thing we're most proud of to date at the Dodo is our SeaWorld coverage. SeaWorld coverage from the Dodo outperforms similar content from mass media publishers on Facebook. What this means is that we're covering these stories in a way that's really resonating. And this is, of course, an area where real change is happening. Recently, as I'm sure everybody here knows, the California Coastal Commission required that SeaWorld stop breeding orcas. This could be the beginning of ending orca captivity and, and the horrible suffering caused by it. So we really see this as an incredibly encouraging and hopeful trajectory. So on these kinds of stories in particular, we feel like it's crucial to have a call to action that allows people to participate. This can be as simple as a call to raise awareness about an important issue by sharing it with your friends, to encourage shares on our piece, recently spotted 103-year-old orcas, bad news for SeaWorld, here's why. We included a call to action that read, spread the word, tell SeaWorld to end its orca breeding program and empty the tanks. And now it's kind of happening, so it's cool. This makes people feel like they're joining a cause, and an intuitive, emotional, user-friendly cause that's easy to get behind. In the social age, sharing is an extremely active, personally empowering action, and it's equivalent to making a statement or a declaration about yourself. So for these issues to really catch fire on social, they have to be easy to understand and easy to get behind. They have to be inclusive and hopeful, and they have to present animal protection as what we all think it is anyway, the next big mainstream movement. The idea should feel like the train is leaving, with or without you, so get on. One thing we're starting to experiment with now is what we're calling video petitions. So a recent video we made about Lolita the orca at the Miami Seaquarium had almost 13.5 million views. This is the last video I'll show you, and I think it's an important one because this is the kind of video that we hope can actually drive signatures to deliverable petitions that bring about material change. There's a link, there was a link to the petition when we posted this, PETA's petition about this, and we drove 40,000 signatures to it with this video. So there's a big tech movement right now towards video anyway, and it's really a great place for us to kind of maximize our reach. So I just want to end by saying a little bit about what I hope we might be able to do in the future. Right now, 30% of our site traffic is international, and we're not really actively trying to engage an international audience. So this is really a function of two things. First, the social platforms have an enormous international user base. These stats are really surprising. Facebook, for example, is 83% international. YouTube's 80% international. So we feel there's an opportunity to have a greater impact by speaking directly to readers about issues on their own turf, their home turf. So whaling in Japan, the rhino horn trade, for example, in Africa, and elephant tourism in Thailand. Important issues are facing animals all around the world, and on top of this, the nature of animal content is inherently global. So we're starting to think about consciously kind of going global, targeting international audiences, and ultimately translating our content. We feel like our videos in particular would be really extremely easy to translate so that we can reach even more people. So we really started the Dodo because we saw an opening to create a digital community for people who care about animals. And we want to give animals a voice in digital media, appeal to as broad an audience as possible, see if we can inspire people to connect to animals, put animal welfare issues front and center, and ultimately contribute to making animal protection a mainstream priority. We see ourselves positioned halfway between the world of media and the world of animal welfare. Our aim is to use digital content to serve animals and contribute to animal protection. Beyond that, we have hopes of starting a Dodo Foundation down the line. Our goal is to raise our visibility and grow our reach really quickly, and to contribute to the well-being of animals by raising awareness about welfare issues through the empathy for animals that we hope our content inspires. And in the future, monetarily through an accompanying philanthropic arm. Our main goal is really to help change attitudes that we hope will ultimately help in changing policy as well. So, thank you.
It's like two different color carpets there. I thought it was a step, and I just
You're gonna plug in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool, Joyce. Don't worry about it. Love you too. Is it okay if I use your power? Izzy? Is it okay if I...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Look at that. Amazing technology. All right. Everybody here okay? Okay, great. So that was awesome. The Dodo has been, when I was working at ALDF, we worked really closely with a lot of the writers, and they're really good at being super thorough and reaching out to the animal law community to find out what are the latest issues. Not only, hey, this is popular, but what's the legal angle to it, and really making sure that they get the facts right. Because there's a lot of folks, animal stuff is so popular, there's a lot of folks who just want to ride that popularity in order to kind of expand their own popularity as a media source, but the Dodo really does a lot of work to make sure they get everything right. And there have been stories of times when they've approached us about something, and we'll say, actually, you know what, that's really not the right tack, it's completely this, and they're like, wow, that's great to know, and they'll completely shift the focus of one of their stories. So I'm going to talk about, having been a legislative director, afforded me a pretty good insight into the process of advocacy and what works and what doesn't. There's a lot of different ways to get there. And so I think a lot of what I said will have an international application, but it's primarily going to focus on domestic policies and alternative advocacy. So just going to run through a scenario here. See if this works. So imagine there's a survey here today, and everyone else has said 94% of it's like, yep, you know what, we all love apples, we all want apples for lunch, right? It's like, okay, great. So we go to lunch, what happens? The clicker doesn't work, is what happens. You go get this like gross, creepy ass looking orange instead of an apple, right? Nobody's happy. Like, well, that's pretty weird. So taking another step, say it's not just like a preference, so I prefer apples over oranges. Say it's something that comports with your direct values, and say, you know what, we actually all would like 94% of us would like to have veggie burgers for lunch today. And so then we go and we have the person who serves lunch. Oh, surprise again, we get this crazy everything under the sun meat burger. So to make things worse, imagine that person who's giving you this thing that you don't want, that we all specifically hired that person, with the very intent of doing what they want us to do. Like we hired you to, fulfill our wishes, and you're doing something else. Even worse, we later find out that the person who's not doing our wishes is actually being paid by the producers of these oranges and crazy burgers to push those products on us, even though we hired them to respect our wishes and make happen what we want. So you'd be furious. You'd say, well, man, you're fired, right? Welcome to my world. This is pretty much exactly what goes on in the legislative process, where you have across the board, let's just look at some numbers and let them speak for themselves. So that number, I didn't pull that number out of a hat. Farm animals specifically is the issue that we're having the most difficulty with in legislatures. But 94% of Americans polled agreed that animals raised for food on farms deserve to be free from abuse and cruelty. Not just reduced, absolutely free from abuse and cruelty. 94% of Americans feel that way. And then, as TJ works on, the things that expose that, 71% of Americans support the, quote, undercover investigative efforts by animal welfare organizations to expose animal abuse on industrial farms. That's pretty astounding numbers, right? So, and what's even more interesting about it seems like, oh yeah, that's fine for all those hippies here in Oregon or California or wherever, Massachusetts, where I currently live. But those numbers are surprisingly consistent across all demographics. Age, 65 to 63%. Gender, surprisingly, men coming in slightly ahead of women on animal welfare. By region, even in the South, 58% of people want to see no animal cruelty for farmed animals. And even political affiliations, 59% of Republicans feel that farm animals should be free from all abuse and cruelty. That's pretty astounding. So, great news, right? Okay, pop the champagne. This is we all feel this way. Well, it's surely going to happen, right? Well, not really. Sadly, as you've learned here at these conferences and other places, most animals raised for food and fiber in this country are completely outside the law, just unprotected until just minutes before they're slaughtered. Sometimes during the transport, but other than the actual during their life on the factory farm, no protections whatsoever. Some of them are even exempted. Not only they're not protected by animal welfare laws like the AWA, they're also in many states exempted from cruelty laws, so they don't even have the protections of dogs and cats. And in addition to the lack of positive change on behalf of farmed animals, animal advocates are having to go on the defensive and spend so much time and effort fighting these efforts to sort of further ingrain this farmed animal abuse by ag laws and right to farm, right to harm bills that would further ingrain such cruelty. Not to be all negative, there has been a lot of progress on the animal cruelty front on improving the lives of animals legislatively. As you see here, Oregon is the third state. My home state of Illinois is consistently number 1. California, number 4. Just a plug for Illinois, my home state, that There's one woman named Leedy Van Cabbage. She works for Best Friends, and her main issue is discriminatory legislation. She was the legislative director for the ASPCA for a while, and she lived just outside Springfield in Illinois. And she's this total perfect lobbyist, kind of Roseanne Barr, backslapper, do what it takes to get it done. And she's always like, screw it, I'll just try it. I'll try it here at Springfield first. Why not? So it was like her little testing ground. One person single-handedly got 24 pieces of humane legislation passed in Illinois. So when you're out there asking like, oh, I'm just one person, what the hell can I do? One person made a substantial change, and she is almost single-handedly the reason Illinois has been consistently #1 in the ALDS rankings. And a good example of these successes is felony cruelty. Before 1986, 30 years ago, there's only 4 states that had felony anti-cruelty provisions in their code, and those are really old laws. Some of them were passed in the 1800s. The last one was passed in like 1921 or something like that. Now, just as of this year, all 50 U.S. states treat animal cruelty as a felony. So you see how rapid this shift was. So a couple of states felt it out in the 80s, had another big wave in the 90s, and then boom. Again, one woman named Sherry Kosel up in South Dakota, she was this one-person dynamo and really did what it took to get that done. She was battling with the Farm Bureau and ag producers up there, and they were calling her every name in the book, and rather than just fighting, she actually just went and sat down with them and talked to them human to human, and they realized that she wasn't out to get them, that this was a real issue. And so after sitting down and talking together, the bill that came back this last year and passed was actually much stronger than the bill the year before that the Farm Bureau had killed, just by actually sitting down with your opposition. But this is all well and good for issues like this. There's not really that many organized interests opposed to, who support, out to promote companion animal cruelty. But when you, and also sometimes with endangered species overseas, that's a bit of an easier fight. But when you are trying to get things done legislatively, it all really does come down to power and influence. So even in those more progressive states like Oregon and California and Illinois and Michigan and Maine, if the objective you have goes right up against the ingrained domestic industry there that substantially profits off of that, you're going to have a much more difficult time. And it's very difficult to challenge those laws. Agencies have a broad swath of discretion. Legislators, unless there was outright bribery, and I spent a month in Louisiana at the legislature in Baton Rouge, and sometimes even with outright bribery, things are allowed to stay. It's really tough to challenge existing laws sometimes. And it all comes down, to follow the money. Sometimes it's not even that apparent. Like, I was always perplexed when it came to hunting. Only 6% of Americans engage in hunting. That's the exact reverse of the ones who 94% who want to see, no farm animal cruelty. And so, and this has been a steady decline for the last 50 years or so. And again, it's a very particular demographic, white males. And, more Americans go bird watching than actually engage in hunting. But yet it is next to impossible to get hunting restrictions passed through state legislatures. Very, very difficult. Even in California. California, very tough. Even though the Californians made great strides, they banned hounding with bears and lead ammunition. But those were very, very tough fights, even in California. And so what's the reason? Oh, what do you know? Follow the money. It's because hunters spent $4.3 billion on firearms and ammunition. So the NRA poses itself as a constitutional gun owners' rights group, but in reality, in my view, it's just a trade organization. Its interests are not to represent gun owners, its interests are to represent gun manufacturers and to make sure there's always a market there. And an actual example of that here in Oregon, there was a bill here to ban the sale of ivory and rhino horn parts. One passed in California, we had passed in New York and New Jersey. The NRA was the one who came in and killed it. They sat down even talking to it. They just said, nope, 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 and killed it. Wouldn't let it pass. The NRA. So is it worth even trying? They say, okay, well, the odds are so stacked against us with I'm talking particularly about farmed animals here. They're so ingrained. They're so like, what's a poor animal advocate to do? Just like say hell with it and go get drunk and drown our sorrows? which may or may not be fun on your 45th birthday. No, we actually have plenty of tools at our disposal. So I'm going to walk through some alternative advocacy strategies here and give some examples specifically about each one of them. Strategy 1, mobilize and be more vocal than your legislative opponents. You know the story about how people in ERs will sometimes get the nurses get Dentine or whatever, some sort of gum, and put it in their nose and wear their mask to like hide the smell of what they're dealing with. Legislative aides in Sacramento joke around about that whenever they have hunting bills coming up, because they know all these crazy mountain people are going to come down from the hills, and it's going to be, and they mobilize, and they're all going to be wearing orange t-shirts, and it's going to be a stinky hearing room. So the answer is not to get mad about it. The answer is to get better. They mobilize. The hunters show up en masse every time there's a bill up. We need to do the same. Strategy number 2, let's just let the public decide via direct democracy and ballot initiatives. Strategy number 3, expose animal abuse and shame those responsible via undercover investigations and avenues like that. And the last one, target pressure points of corporate pressure points with consumer sentiment. So I'm going to walk through some of these. Number 1, be more vocal than your opponents. I remember the first time I used the internet. It was 1995, sitting at a buddy's house, like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I can click on this and it goes to this, and like this band over here, like, oh, it just blew my mind, right? It's like 8 hours later go by, and I'm just, yeah. Advocates back then didn't have these tools. So email, social media, actions alerts, Twitter. I mean, you can instantly get information out there. Like again, the SeaWorld. I was out to dinner with somebody in New York City, 10:30 at night. My phone starts exploding. We have cell phones now as well. With the SeaWorld, the California Coastal Commission decision, which I had worked on. It's amazing. Instantly forwarding the. And one example of how successful this has been is with AgGag. Just since 2013, there have been 26 AgGag bills introduced across 17 states. All of them but 2 were defeated by animal advocates. And even one of those 2, through the work of our litigation team at ALDF, was struck down as unconstitutional in Idaho this year. So that's a pretty remarkable record. When you've got the entire agricultural industry pushing these bills, and we were able to mobilize, get information out there, and fight back, and basically have a 24-2 success rate. And a great example of this was in Arizona this year. There was a bill that would have, this terrible bill that we managed to kill in 2014, and then it came back and resurrected in 2015. It would have removed livestock from the cruelty. Arizona was one of those few states that actually did include livestock in their anti-cruelty code. And this would have taken them out of the cruelty code and put them in their own separate but equal category that would have been administered only by the Department of Agriculture, right? Department of Agriculture. So Sheriff Joe Arpaio is a very colorful, infamous character on many fronts. But he's a remarkable animal advocate and takes animal cruelty extremely serious. He's probably the toughest sheriff in the country on animal cruelty. And he was fighting against this bill. I think the Arizona Department of Ag only had 6 investigators for the entire state. He's like, I've got 17 just in Maricopa County investigating animal cruelty. So it would have prohibited cities and counties from restoring protection. It's a terrible bill. And the other thing, it would require notifying Department of Ag of any investigations, and it didn't define that, so that could even apply to undercover investigations. So it could be like a secret ag provision that was snuck in there. So we killed the bill in 2014. 2015, worked really hard. We managed to stall it through some maneuvers, and we think we've won. Cool, everyone can relax, focus on a different state. But then there's this thing called striker bills, where you can essentially just take an existing bill that's already worked through the process, completely cut and paste everything, and jack a whole other bill right into it. We call them these zombie bills, because something you've already killed can come completely back from the dead at the last minute. And that's what happened. The striker bill came up 2 weeks before the intersession and passes before we can even get there to do anything. So governor then had 5 days to sign. Once it goes through a test, this is how fast. For those students out there, when I started ALDF, I was a completely wrong impression of how a big portion of law works. I was under the impression that litigation was always the rough and tumble, fast-paced, race to the courthouse, file this motion, and that legislation was this slow, glacial, took forever to get anything done, right? Completely opposite, in my experience. Litigation, getting a judge to schedule something can take half a year many times. Getting a decision can take even longer. Whereas with legislation, the Idaho Ag bill that we invalidated, that was introduced at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Monday was a federal holiday. The hearing for that bill was at 8 a.m. on Tuesday. So there's one business hour between this bill's introduction and holding the hearing on it. That, you know, if you want to oppose it, you have to get your butt there and get into the hearing and oppose it. So here's this. All of a sudden, this passes. We've got 5 days, and he can sign it in 5 minutes. You know, 5 days is the deadline. So what happens? We all mobilize. All the animal groups work together. We coalesce. We, you know, divvy up strategies and tactics based on our strengths and weaknesses. So is Ian Elwood in the room? Darn. So ALDF's awesome online editor, Ian Elwood, threw together this graphic. So we decided amongst the group that ALDF's particular angle was going to be to target the tourism board, because hitting people where the money is what really gets their attention. So he took one of their famous ads and used the same font and graphics and background and just said, hey, if animals aren't protected here, we're going to take our tourism dollars elsewhere. And then when you click on that, it takes you directly to their site to repost this on the Department of Tourism's website and also give them a call. And they were taking this very seriously. The Department of Tourism was very polite, saying we are tabulating all of these calls, and this is a very important issue to us. And then public opinion, which again is what my whole point here is the public we already have the public on our side, 94%. Look at this. This is on the very specific issue of, oh, Ian, you come in now. I just gave you a whole project. I got to back it up. So I just gave your awesome slide here. This is Ian Elwood. Give him a round of applause. He put this together literally in like an hour and got it up on social media because we were in such a hurry. And so, again, just not even general, on the very specific issue of this bill, do you think that livestock should be taken out of the cruelty code in Arizona? Look at these numbers. Republican, 85% of Republicans said livestock should not be taken out of the cruelty code. Overall, 87%. I mean, these are pretty amazing numbers. And Republicans say, like, even your own constituencies, if you go ahead and do this, you're going to be going against, 80% of the 7% of the voters in your own state. And so, again, we know the public feels this way. It's our job to channel that public sentiment into concrete action. So over that weekend, we had 5 days. In those 5 days, we drove 19,248 calls and emails into the governor's office asking for a veto. Guess how many people called this for asking him to sign the bill? 3. So, campaign money, yes, there's a lot of money being thrown around. But campaign money is only valuable to the extent that it helps you win elections. If you already know, 19,248 to 3, that's pretty simple math even for a politician. You know what I mean? Like, okay, wait a minute. So, and so when I forget it. I can never remember Karl Rove's name. I just remembered it. Karl Rove, for some reason, got a mental block. Karl Rove raised gajillions of dollars in the last election. Presidential election to target all these campaigns. Crossroads GPS was his company. Just gajillions of dollars, and they ended up having like a 0.3% success rate for all their money that they spent. So money doesn't always win. Money's only good. We're a democracy. So if you can channel, tabulate, and target this public sentiment into concrete action, you can win, and that's exactly what happened. So here's Doug Ducey. Today I issue my first veto. And look at some of the language he used. This is a Republican governor in a Republican state vetoing a Republican bill that was pushed by one of the biggest industries in his own state. No, I know we agree that all animal cruelty is inexcusable, unacceptable, and absolutely will not be tolerated in the state of Arizona. No animal should be the victim of abuse. Moreover, the perpetrator should be held to account and probably penalized to the fullest extent of the law. That's pretty amazingly strong language for a Republican governor in a Republican state in the process. And it wasn't like, hey, sorry guys, I kind of had to do this. He's coming out hard. So that's the first strategy, is just, be better than they are. They've got the money, we've got the numbers, we've got the people, mobilize, be involved legislatively. The second option is to just bypass the captured interests of legislators and agencies and just take things directly to the people through public ballot initiatives. In 20 years, there have been 44 animal protection ballot measure campaigns. 30 of those have been successful with 69% success rate. Hey, Russ. Which is great. So this is like all the money doesn't, yes, these things take money to happen, but it's really about just changing public opinion. So getting information out there can be just as successful. And there's actually one coming up here in, wait a second. Sorry, I got my slides mixed up. But there's one coming up here, Save Endangered Animals in Oregon. There's a grassroots campaign here to save 12 highly trafficked wild animal types by putting a measure on the ballot. So I'm just kind of confused here. Hold on 1 second here. All right. Rats. Okay, one of my slides has disappeared. But the history of this, let me see if I can pop out. Forget it. I'll just talk about it. So where this has been, because the whole purpose of this, my goal here is to talk about farm animal protection, because it's one of those that is most hemmed in by the constraints of money and politics. So 2002 was the first campaign. They did a ballot initiative in Florida that banned gestation crates, and it passed. So animal advocates then targeted Arizona, where they added, not only gestation crates, they added veal tethering, and that passed. So suddenly it looks like a trend. And those are not huge, I mean, they're decent pig producing states, but they weren't high on the list, which was strategic because they knew there'd be less opposition. But all of a sudden now you've got this trend. After the Arizona bill passed, they said the head of the Veal Producers Association said, oh my God, we need to get in front of this. I think that veal tethering needs to be banned industry-wide. I mean, that's astounding after just one ballot initiative. So then the next jewel in the crown was California in 2008, passed Prop 2, which took it one step further. You had gestation crates, veal tethering, but you added banning battery cages for hens. And that's been phenomenally successful. And it seemed like forever when that passed that it was going to finally go into gear, and it's happening now. It just went into effect this year. I mean, that time goes by pretty quickly. So now, going on as we speak in my newly adopted state of Massachusetts, the Citizens for Farm Animal Protection Coalition is gathering signatures right now. They've got till November 16th to get 95,000 signatures to get a measure on the ballot that would I'll ban all the same three things as Prop 2: gestation crates, tethering of veal, and battery heat cages for hens, but take that a step further by not only banning those used domestically, by banning any products produced anywhere else in the country or world from being sold within the state. So it's a way of kind of going across the jurisdiction and not only. I'm not being very articulate about that because my stupid slide's gone. I'm pissed about it. So essentially, not only controlling what happens in your own state as far as your own producers, which can sometimes actually harm your own producers against competing producers in competing states, which is exactly which gets to Chris Christie banning the gestation crate bill in New Jersey, where why do they support New Jersey? 92% of voters in New Jersey supported it. All the legislature supported it, but he vetoed it. Why? Because he wants to be president. And what's the first test of anyone who wants to become president? The Iowa straw poll. What's the largest pork-producing state in the country? Iowa. So here he is overruling his own voters to curry favor with voters in another state. So the Massachusetts, though, it's going to be the most progressive farm animal protection legislation to date, and would have this effect because now anyone who wants to sell in Massachusetts has been on those things too, so it's not very long before people are like, well, it's too hard to do both of those. We'll just go, which I'll show you a little bit in a sec. So the third option is to just expose this, because even when we have public sentiment on our side, a lot of people they want this stuff generally, but they still don't know the reality of what's going on. So Undercover Investigation is one of the most effective tools we have, and part of that effect is tabulated. 46% of those who said they switched to a vegetarian or vegan diet said that quote-unquote online videos played a role in their decision. And this isn't just, there's some actual, the meat industry themselves. Full disclosure, I manage a farm that's been in my family for 178 years. My great-uncle Charlie was head of the Dairy and Animal Science Department at Kansas State. And here's what the Kansas State ag researchers have to say. As a whole, media attention to animal welfare has significant negative effects on U.S. meat demand. That's why I want to shut this down. And this is what this looks like. I'm not going to show you the video. I showed it last year and people hated me for it. This is an undercover investigation by Mercy for Animals at a dairy producer in Wisconsin. And you can see this poor cow being lifted up by chains through the air. It looks like something like alien abduction video or something. But what was the effect of this one investigation of this one producer? So what often happens is, the poor, underpaid, often exploited workers who are caught on tape get immediately fired and scapegoated. So 4 Weiss Brothers employees were convicted of multiple counts of animal cruelty. DiGiorno Pizza. So Weiss Brothers supplied to another producer that supplied to DiGiorno Pizza. DiGiorno Pizza said we're no longer accept any cheese made with milk from that dairy. 4,500 cows, that's a pretty substantial, and that's with their single biggest client. So that's a substantial hit to that dairy. And other people are going to take note of that, other producers. Taking it internationally, Nestle, people think Nestle just makes chocolate milk. They're actually the world's largest food company. $101 billion in revenues last year. So as a result of this one investigation, that's one little mid-sized farm in Iowa, or Wisconsin, they said that they're going to require across their entire platform, all of their 7,300 suppliers worldwide, going to eliminate tail docking, dehorning, gestation crates, battery cages at hundreds of thousands of farms worldwide. This is the effect of one single investigation, which is exactly why the force on the other side are fighting so hard to shut them down. So this just shows you how effective those tools are. And the public supports this. This is part of that earlier poll I showed you earlier, before. Not only do they support these bills, but these people who actually oppose ag bills. 64% of Americans oppose laws that would that restrict or make illegal these undercover investigations. 50% strongly oppose. So the fourth strategy of alternative advocacy I'll get to is targeting corporate pressure points. Because again, we know that we all feel this way. 94% of us feel this way, that farm animals should not be subjected to cruelty. But yet, how do we really make that sentiment have a concrete impact? Well, consumer dollars are probably the most powerful alternative advocacy tool. Mix up the language there a little bit. And you know, corporations exist to make money, and so if you have an impinge on their ability to make money, it's going to get their attention very quickly. And so for many years, I remember coming to the Lewis and Clark conference 12 years ago, and like the farm animal, the farm animal panel was like, oh God, I should really go because I love Paul, but my God, it makes you want to go jump off a roof. It's so depressing. Like the interest on the other side, so much money on the other side. Meeting is so ingrained in our culture. It would always just be like the most depressing part of the whole weekend. You just want to just go home and drink Colt 45. But yet, then the animal advocates got smart, and Paul Shapiro and others decided to change their tactics. So before, they were putting all the pressure on like going to these producers, the people actually raising the chickens and the pigs, and saying you should really change your practices. And they're like, why the hell should I? Most people, like, who's ever heard of Weiss Brothers Farms before? People have heard of DiGiorno Pizza, people have heard of Nestle, but no one's heard of Weiss Brothers Farms. So they've got no incentive to change their behavior. They don't care what consumers think. And their only relevant factor is profit. So yes, you can occasionally shame them with investigations on a one-by-one ad hoc basis, but no one has the resources to do that. And in just reality, for them, if it costs like 1/100th of 1 penny per egg to change, that's not worth it for them, because over the course of billions of eggs, that adds up to real dollars. So in the mid-2000s, they changed their tactics. Like, you know what? Why are we battling against these people who are never going to change? They've got no incentive to change. We know the public sentiment's there, but they've got no nexus with the public. Who does? It's the retailers. It's the Burger Kings and McDonald's. And it's like, essentially, McDonald's, they're not a producer. They're essentially just like a marketing and delivery vehicle. And so they're highly sensitive to consumer sentiment because they spend so much money in marketing and everything. So restaurant franchises, like I said, grocery store chains. People don't really think of grocery store chains being on the forefront of animal advocacy, but they are extremely powerful in deciding what gets put on shelves. So Just Mayo, for example, it's kind of a joke, hanging with a bunch of sushi chefs in San Francisco and want to tell them about Just Mayo, like, oh, I'll just go grab some and you can try it. And I go to like literally 5 different kind of alternative grocery stores, health food stores. No one had it. I just walk out like, I can't believe it. I'm literally walking to Safeway because I know it's going to be the one that has a hit new alternative vegan product, and they did. Food service providers, Sodexo, Marriott, they're like, they provide so much. They have so much purchasing power, and so that's exactly it. And so now look what's happened. These are all the companies that have decided to change and made an impact and adopted policies to either go cage-free, battery cage-free, gestation crate-free, or field tethering and other animal welfare issues. There's a whole list, but I don't have time to go into. Just this month, just mentioned McDonald's. McDonald's announced it's going to go cage-free by 2020. think, okay, McDonald's is quite a lot. How about McDonald's sells you 2 billion eggs just in the U.S. and Canada, and they've already adopted this policy for their EU suppliers. That's substantial. That's directly improving the lives of 8 million hens a year, just by one company making this decision. And this is primarily due to a guy named Josh Balk, which is the Humane Society of the United States, and Paul Shapiro as well. And just unbelievable. Josh Balk's also one of the founders of Hampton Creek, who makes just mayo. Then, just this week, Rembrandt Foods announces they're going to cage-free. Rembrandt is the third largest U.S. egg producer. The second largest producer, Hickman Foods, already went cage-free. So between the two of them, they produce 10% of all U.S. eggs. And so this shows you, like the top part, you get the retailer to do it. It's like, okay, yeah, we've got no skin in this fight. Like, why not? We'll go our consumers want it, sure. So they make the decision, and all these producers who were like battling forever and having no luck with, all of a sudden, like, they're falling all over themselves to provide the supply to McDonald's. So just lastly, real quick, I'll just take a couple more minutes if that's cool. So Change.org developed a couple years ago, and it's this amazing platform for advocacy that accomplishes several goals. Informing the populace about animal issues, tabulating that public sentiment. You say, oh wow, this many 100,000 people care about this issue, and then taking all that sentiment and targeting it directly towards decision makers who can have an effect on that issue. And you then have the multiplier effect of social media, of this being shared around via Facebook and Twitter. You can track shares and views. So, okay, that's the same. So, I ended up getting pneumonia this last year, and I was bored out of my mind. It's like, and I pull up on my phone that South African Airways had just unilaterally decided to stop transporting hunting trophies, saying we're depleting our own national resource. So many more people come here to look at these animals than to kill them. We're stopping doing this. And at the bottom of this article, it said Delta Airlines, which is the only other U.S. carrier with service to South Africa, declined to comment. I was like, man, like I fly Delta all the time. I literally have flown 700,000 miles on Delta in the last 5 years. I'd be their diamond status, whatever. I'd be the perfect guy to. And the other thing about Change.org is that they don't want to just be seen as a vehicle for other organizations. They require that all their petitions come from individuals, not organizations. So like, I'd be the perfect guy to ask it. So, well, really spend some depressing time. Try spending a couple hours searching for the perfect hunting trophy photograph. I don't have time to pull the other one. The other one was like a bunch of dudes with a rhino that had a dead rhino with like an American flag draped over it, just appalling. So I do this back in May, and it starts to gather pretty fast. It started to get a few 100,000 signatures, getting close to 500,000 at 400,000, and then in July, this guy happened, Walter Palmer. And so a lot of people don't know, but Cecil the lion was actually shot about 3 weeks before the story broke. And even though he was claiming he knew nothing about it, I didn't realize his own bartender turned on him and said, well, that's funny because he was here at the bar last week showing everyone photos on his phone bragging about how he just killed the biggest lion in Africa. So he knew exactly what he'd done. And so this has added fuel to the petition. And so I go to Delta and I said, where's Walter Palmer from again? Anyone remember? Minneapolis. What's Delta's third largest U.S. hub? Minneapolis. I was like, you guys have any idea? Because this is 3 weeks before. So before anyone knew, if Walter Palmer had flown back to the U.S., I go, can you imagine, look at the thousands upon thousands of articles on, she even called it Cecil fatigue, as he called it earlier. There's almost fatigue, there were so many articles about it. Can you imagine if every second sentence of those articles, and Delta Airlines flew Cecil's, illegally poached and butchered carcass back to the United States, despite being given a petition with 400,000 signatures asking them to stop that crap like 2 months ago. They would look like fools. PR nightmare. So I think they realized they dodged a bullet, and then we had success. So not only do we have success, so on the same day, talk about the best day ever. This is my last week at ALDF as well. The very same day that we get the ag gag, Idaho ag gag law was ruled unconstitutional, I had just sent, Change.org was asking me, hey, we really need to do an update on Cecil. It's been a week now. And unfortunately, a couple weeks before, South African Airways had decided to rescind their initial ban. So I was just in denial. Like, okay, well, if South African Airways is now transferred, there's no way we're going to get Delta to do this now. And I was just head in the sand. bottle of Colt 45, whatever. And so like, okay, but I should really address this. So that's when I put this all in print, send it to change that. They're in the middle of editing it that Monday morning, and I get a call. It's like, oh my God, check your email. And the person that changed it over, Poland's like, and it's this cryptic message from Delta. And we call them and like, yep, we're going to send the press release out in half an hour. Just want to give you a heads up. And then boom, I mean, across the board, New York Times reported, I mean, every major news outlet in the country reported this. And I'm in the middle now moving from California to Boston. I'm driving through and I get a call from CNN, like, you gotta come in. It's like, I'm in like shorts and t-shirt, I'm driving for 3 days. And they're like, where are you? I'm like, well, I'm about an hour outside New York. Like, our studio's in New York, you gotta get in there. So this is Quest Means, so I run an art exhibition that travels over the world. I travel internationally all the time. And Quest Means Business is like the #1 international business show. He won International Broadcaster of the Year. And here he is, spending about a good 5-minute segment talking about this issue. And he went after me pretty hard. I only battled a little bit, but afterwards he's like, I go to Africa all the time. I completely agree. Because all these people on Facebook are like, that guy's a jerk. And he's like, I completely agree with you. You're doing the Lord's work. So it's this multiplier effect. If you not only achieve this victory, but then it educates everybody about these issues. So what's the answer? You. We're the ones who hold the power. We have this public sentiment. We just need to make our voices heard. So what you can do, you get an action alert email, sign up for all the different groups, ALDF, HSUS, PDS, sign up for them all. We don't send that stuff out willy-nilly. We're actually, internally, we have debates all the time on, we call it alert fatigue. We don't want to keep asking people to do it. We'll only ask you to do something if we really think it's important to do. So pick up the phone. We've had legislators say, I get 5 calls on something, that gets my attention. I get 10 calls about something from constituents. I'm like, holy crap, that's a problem I need to address. 10 phone calls, that's sometimes all it takes. Get involved in direct campaigns. Come to Massachusetts. The coalition is willing to pay airfare for anyone. We got till November 16th to gather 95,000 signatures. We'll pay your airfare, put you up in a house, come help us gather some signatures, and take the initiative, change their org. I mean, it's like me lying on my butt sick, like, hey, this might be a good idea, and look at all the effect it's had. So thanks a lot. That's my information, and feel free to call me, get a hold of me. Sorry for going over. Still curious where that slide disappeared to.
So we have about 8 minutes for questions.
I have a question, I guess, for both. You said that you'd like to harness sort of existing public sentiment about animal welfare to sort of fill your platform. I didn't see a lot about farm animals today. Maybe we do address that more on the Dodo. And then we heard from Chris that 97% of the people say that seeing those videos of factory farm monkeys influenced their decision to go vegetarian or vegan.
46%, yeah.
Okay. And I was wondering how you think about that, whether you are considering sort of surfacing that type of content on your site. And I also heard a comment from you that said that you don't like content that's sanctimonious and shrill. And so I'm just curious how you find that.
Yeah.
And how you think about
I love this question. I didn't include a slide on sort of farm animals and ag, but I easily could have. We're covering stuff like that all the time. I have to be honest that it's been the most challenging thing, which shouldn't come as a surprise. But people, it's so ingrained, and it's so upsetting, and it's so overwhelming, and even people who are vegan don't want to go there, So the way that we've been able, we've tried covering it all different ways, and we're continuing to, but the way that we found it that's the most successful is individual stories of farm animals that are really kind of emotionally powerful. So it's kind of the same across content categories, but we've done stories about a dairy cow that was taken from her mom and the mom crying for her, stuff like that, and that really goes viral because people are, we always include it sort of a way to help and what you can do to actually get involved. And I'm so inspired to sort of try to include more direct legislative calls to action in what we do. But so that's kind of the deal with the farm animal stuff. And in terms of some of the more upsetting videos, we do include them sometimes, usually with a warning. We try to appeal to people. There are people doing that already. A lot of the groups, that's their tactic. That's been the tactic of the animal rights movement for a long time, and it's very successful. We're taking a different approach, and trying to reach those people that kind of can't handle that. And there are a lot of them, you know, so it's kind of a different sensibility. So I guess when I think the third part of your question was the sanctimonious and shrill thing. I think people don't like to be told sort of that they're bad people. And I think that if you make people connect and feel good about that connection, it's actually more energizing.
It's not really your, and the thing is too, just in the Dodo's defense, it's not, you know, it's not really your job necessarily, you know. And honestly, in a way, it's tough because your role is to pull people to your site to then expose them to these things and let them see stuff. But you're in a weird position, unlike someone who, like an animal advocacy organization whose job is to change their mind specifically on the targeted issue. People know that they're going to find it. If you put something on your site that's actually going to be repellent to people, it fights against what your underlying mission is. So it's a really tough spot for you guys to be in. And yeah, they have been great on AgAg. They've written a ton about it. And Sarah was telling me at the Solve Summit yesterday, they were talking about how to, getting people to watch these videos. And one thing they were doing was, hey, we'll give you, it's like this pay-to-play thing. First they started giving them $1. You're like, oh, $1, Like, hey, we'll give you a vegan donut or a vegan cupcake if you watch this, 5-minute, undercover investigation video. And people are like, appalled by it, but they're going away with this happy vegan product, and it's soft and blow, and they're like, oh, I can do that. It's a really clever strategy of kind of, carrot and stick thing.
One of the things that I sign a lot of petitions, and I send them to my friends and things like that. One of the things I find frustrating sometimes when I sign a petition is they don't tell me what number person I am and follow. So, some of them do. I think
Change does immediately. It says right there.
Some of them don't. Have you ever found that?
I think that's stupid.
You want to know. You almost want to, and I like when you can see you're the other people that signed it.
Yeah.
And
Change.org is the one I highly recommend using the most. And they're so
and that's for individuals. And then also not finding out what happened with that petition or what's going to happen with it. What is the purpose? Who's going to bring it to whom?
Right.
And
I think Change is good about that too.
Great about that. I mean, almost to a fault. Like, I'm kind of going to sign something like, God, I know I signed this, I'm going to get like 20 email I really want to support the cause, but I just wish there was like, hey, I support this, but I don't need to know what happens.
So eventually we would love to do sort of our own deliverable petitions, but for now I think it makes much more sense to link out to Change, and
so you use Change.
Oh yeah, we do. And they have, and then we use petitions that come from individual organizations too. But Change is my personal favorite for the reasons that you just said.
Oh, okay.
And they're smart about it too. They have a lot of their own internal metrics, so they know, hey, we can, they've got all sorts of high-end kind of analytics behind what they do, so they know specifically, hey, this petition seems like these 20 other people have signed petitions doing X, Y, Z. They'd be very interested, so we'll send this petition to them to promote. They make you kind of earn it first. They're not gonna. They'll give you advice on the front end, but they're not gonna really go out of their way until it proves itself that it. So we got like a couple thousand, and then Ian put a post about it on the ALBF site of my petition, and boom, jumped to 5,000 like that. And then Shane is like, oh wow, this is catching fire, and then they started promoting it and just sort of caught on like that. So thanks again.
Next.
Yes, this is a question for the Dodo. Bears on a bill that Chris talked about, HB 2150, was covered by the Dodo. I remember the article specifically. And I remember at the time sharing it, and I'm not a lawyer, but I have some lawyer friends, and they commented and said, well, look, there's a problem here that this article is missing the legal context. Do you think that, are you at all concerned that when you use the language, which I think is good, common language that's not technical, that all of your audience can view, does sometimes miss legal context and nuance, and it can present the picture as being not as fully explained as it needs to be?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I think that's right, and it's something we talk about all the time. And how do we report on these issues in a way that's thorough and careful, but also not sort of really jargony and hard to get through. And it's a balance, and I think sometimes we do it really well, and sometimes we don't do it as well. And I think we're doing it a lot better now than we were a year ago. So it's sort of a learning process, and individual writers are better at it than others. Some are better than others. So we really try to, particularly on the things with kind of complicated legislative issues that need to be sort of pared down in a really digestible way, we match those with writers who are really interested in it and passionate about it and have a background and really want to get it right. So we're definitely always thinking about that. And it's a challenge of what we're doing, for sure.
And we were talking earlier, the Dodo approached me on the very first day that they published. They contacted me to get a story right and the full perspective on Justin Bieber's monkey. It was like the very first day, like, straight out of the box.